everybody, it's a new week, it's a beautiful day, so I thought I'd do another inlay. So this week, we're going to do twisted copper inlays. Now, what I'm going to do, and I'll show you how to make this nice twisted copper, is I'm going to embed it in the rim of this bowl. And around the copper wire, I'm actually going to take powdered soapstone, combine it with CA glue, and we're going to make an inlay out of it. And the great thing about these types of inlays is as you're twisting it, you can make it kind of longer or you can make it tighter like this. And the other thing too is when you're sanding this inlay back, as you're sanding it back, you'll actually get, it will give you different looks. And I'll show you as we go along. And it'd be interesting to see which one you like the best. So you can comment down below. That'd be kind of cool. You know, I liked it when in the beginning, I liked it near the end, you know, whatever. So yeah, that's this week's project. So anyway, let's get to the lathe, get the bowl trued up and sand it and coat a finish on it, and then we can carry on with the inlay. Okay, so before we cut the groove in the rim of the bowl, it's all sanded up now. This is actually the ground wire out of that house wire, 14.3 or something like that. So what I like to do is mount one end in the vise And as you can see, it's all kind of ripply. Grab it with my pliers. Straighten it. And yeah, if you're only doing one of these, you can use the ground wire out of it and you don't have to go through the hassle of stripping this insulation off. But if you do, it's not really that big of a deal. Strip this off here. And off it goes. Nice and easy. So the reason why I haven't cut the groove yet is because depending on how you twist this wire, how tight it is, it will actually change the diameter of the wire. And we want this wire to actually fit tightly into the inlay. So we need to make sure that we have, first of all, the right size. Right size that we're looking for. And that we actually cut the groove for the inlay properly. So this end, this is how I twist it. Goes into the vise. Pull these along so they're even. Actually, pull this around. And this other end gets mounted into my drill. Now make sure that when you put it in the drill that the wires are both got the same tightness on it. That they're both pumped. Okay, so I'm going to pull this tight and start rolling it. There, hopefully that's a little closer. You'll be able to see this. So you can see it's quite loose right now. And that's fine. I've put them in like this. And what I want to do after this is inlaid, I want to basically sand through these upper ridges to expose the wires in this direction and in this direction. So it's best if it's a little tighter. Again, I'm keeping it quite tight here. And there. That should be good. One thing that you want to consider, or one thing you want to keep in mind, is that the more you twist this together, the shorter this becomes. So when you wrap this around, if it's not big enough to meet the diameter of your bowl, then I'll have to redo it and get a longer piece of wire. But this is just some wire we had laying around from an old construction job, and again, it'll be reused. Okay, so we're getting ready to cut the groove. Now, ordinarily, this is the parting tool that I use. It's 3/16. The problem is, if you can see that, if you cut the groove with that, this is going to be kind of loose in there. So I just happen to have a parting tool that's 1/8 of an inch, and it should be pretty darn close to what we want. Either way, if the groove isn't big enough, I can go back in and just touch it a little bit, and then this should fit perfectly. Okay, so I've cut the end off one end there, and let's just see how this is going to fit. So this is a little loose. Yeah, I probably could have used another one, but you know what? That's fine. I'll put that in there. I'll just hit it with a little bit of CA glue, and we'll work all the way around the bowl, and it'll be just great. Anyway, in a perfect world, this would be just snug as it goes in, and then that way you don't have to fight with it to keep it in place. The other thing too is when you cut this groove in the top here, you got to make sure that you go straight in with the tool. If you go in on an angle, it will measure differently from the surface to where it is in the bottom, because it's actually going to be smaller or larger. So anyway, if you go straight, you won't have any issues. Okay, so time to measure this and cut it and get it put in. And spin the lock on here. So as you can see, we just had just enough, really. Got about an inch to spare. And so this is why it's nice if it's nice and snug. You don't have to worry about it popping out. So I'm going to mark this off, and I'm going to mark it probably just a little bit long. And I'll just cut it off with some side cutters. And then we'll put it back in and check it for fit. And if it's a little longer, we'll nip off a little bit more, and so on and so on. At this transition joint where they come together, it's going to be, you know, you're probably going to see that in the end. But it's still a pretty cool inlay. Okay, again, try and cut it off as straight as you can. There, that's pretty darn good. So again, I'll go around after I put a coat of finish on, and I'm going to tell you why I put a coat of finish on. So the inlays are held in with thin CA glue, and of course you want that glue to flow in and lock this all inside in the groove, where, you know, the groove that I've cut for the inlay. But the problem is, if you happen to overflow this, because remember, we're going to put soapstone on top of this, and so we're going to be saturating it, and sometimes it'll run down over the edge onto the end grain. Now, if you've got raw wood with no finish on it and that thin CA glue, it will wick right into the end grain on the bowl. So we don't want that. If it goes on the side grain, that's not so bad. It still might stain a little bit, but it's pretty much a guarantee that you'll have a glue mark down your bowl. Sometimes it depends on the wood, but you know, I find that by putting that coat of finish on there, it's something I don't have to worry about. So we'll throw a coat of finish on this. After that's dry, we'll put the inlay in it. And so yeah, first coat of finish coming up. That's always the best part. Okay, first coat of finish. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I do that. As I said before, because of the glue, but also on the inside here, I like to seal the inside somewhat. It's still quite rough and still quite porous, but if you seal it with a coat of finish, there'll be less of a tendency for the glue to wick through the end grain and stain the outside or the inside of the bowl. So that's another reason why I do it. And this is again a salad bowl finish by General Finishes. I just put it in these squeeze bottles just to, it's easier to use. So I'll put this on here really heavily saturate it. And it's not even really all that important to do this face because it's going to be sanded back anyway. So yeah, the squeeze balls, you tend to certainly waste less of it because it's not cheap. And whatever excess there is, I will wipe it off. And anyway, we'll put this out in the sun maybe for a little, about an hour. Probably be good enough for it. And then we'll put the inlay in it. There, while we're waiting for the finish to cure up a little bit on there, back to roughing. Okay, so the finish has dried good enough that we can carry on with the inlay. So what I'm going to do, and I've already cut this to length, is I'm going to place it in, and I'm just going to go around and put it down with CA glue to hold it in place. Starting at the beginning where I put it in here, and then I'll work my way around the bowl, just putting this down. I've also got a little pick tool like this, so I can put it in there and kind of pull it along so that it's nice and tight here on the end. I don't think you're going to get much better than that. And that's in there pretty good. So I'm just going to go around and hit it with glue and spots and push down on it so that it stays in place. And of course I'm using Starbond thin, like I always do for all my inlays. And of course the accelerator. So I don't want to start right here because it may wick over to the end on the other side, which I don't want. So put some glue in there, just push down on it, make sure that it's seated, and just work your way around, making sure that it's all the way down on the bottom. And the reason for that is if it isn't flat right on the bottom and it's lifted in some areas, the inlay, when this is sanded back, will look different. Now this here in itself could make a really nice inlay. Just fill this full of CA glue, let it set, sand it back. You could use epoxy as well. And I have, but I think for this one we're going to use the soapstone. So I'll get that ready and I'll show you how that's done. Okay, let's talk the soapstone. So I get my stuff from a variety of different sources. Just do a search online and find out where you can get it. This block of soapstone actually came from Lee Valley. And what I do is I smash it up with a hammer and then run it through this strainer. As you can see, it's quite fine. And then that way, it will give me some really fine inlay material. So what I'll do is I'll place this in the groove and I'll knock on the side of the bowl to try and knock it down in around the wire itself, and then I'll hit it with the CA glue. Yeah, so anyway, oh, the other thing I should mention too is make sure that your inlay space is clean. So this is a reusable pad that I use, and you can see there's got duct tape on it, and I don't know, there's probably a bunch of layers on it, but it's clean. So that way the stuff can get dumped out of the bowl afterwards and it's not contaminated with sawdust. And there's nothing worse than doing these inlays, and then if you see a tiny little piece of sawdust or something, go, that doesn't look like it should be there. So anyway, make sure your area is clean. Make sure you're blowing yourself off with the air gun so that nothing's going to fall off you onto the inlay to contaminate it. So anyway, I just go along here like this. I'll fill this up, and then just use a handle on a screwdriver, kind of knock on the bowl. Then I just take my finger and I don't push down on it. I just kind of plow it off. If it's indented a little bit on the inlay, that's probably going to be more beneficial than having it proud of the surface. And so we'll put this back on the lathe, and we'll have to fill this at least another 2 or 3 more times until we get all of the voids filled. Just kind of the nature of the beast when you're working with natural materials. And you know, you could take a resin if you wished and put it over top of this that's, you know, solid in color, and then sand it back. It would give you the same effect. And you know, resins for me certainly are on the horizon. I'm gonna get some ideas for them. But I like the natural look of the soapstone. So I think we're about ready for the glue here. It's important that you use the thin CA. If you try to use medium or thick, this is not going to work. You want this to migrate through the inlay and then lock into the pores of the wood. So here's the thin that I use. Now, as you can see, it doesn't really want to go into it initially. Once the inlay gets wet, it will absorb the glue a lot better. And there's not a lot of inlay material here anyway. I'll do solid inlays that are, you know, are this wide of soapstone and other natural materials. Now, you could have used alabaster in here. You want something that's easy to sand. If you took shell material and put it in amongst this, then you're gonna have a lot of sanding. See, there's why you put the first coat of finish on. Too busy talking when I should be watching what I'm doing. And ordinarily I would just go around the bowl here, but I'm trying to keep it in the shot for you here. Jeez, again. And that's not a big deal. It's now that finishes on there, I'll be able to sand that out quite easily. And I was going to sand the inside of this again anyway. It's just best if you don't do it. If it all looks wet, then you know that it's not going to take any more glue. And what I'll do is I'll leave this overnight, and then we'll sand this back tomorrow and fill it and sand it until we get what we want. And again, use this stuff in a well-ventilated area. The fumes that come off of CA glues when they're curing can be quite aggressive. Now I could hit that with the accelerator if I wanted to, but I'm not going to because there's no need for it. I'll just let that continue to wick in, and then I can guarantee you it's not coming out. So we'll put this on the lathe tomorrow and that's what we'll do. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so it's the next day. Our inlay should be good and dry. Yesterday, I was saying that what I wanted to do was sand through this upper part, but I realized last night that if you do that, and this happened to me before, there's not enough material wrapped around the copper wire to hold it in place. Now what I've done here is this is the same wire, I've just folded it over on itself again. And if you did sand through the top here, exposing the ends of the wires, you'd be fine, because the wire would be mostly encased in the soapstone and the CA glue, and it's not going to come out then. So all we're going to do is sand back, exposing just the top layer of this, and it should give us kind of like a herringbone pattern maybe, but we'll find out here in a sec. Okay, so to sand the inlay back, this is 60 grit on a random air-powered round orbital sander. And initially I'll just sand this off with the lathe off, just to get the glue and any high spots down. Then I'll turn the lathe on and of course use this to sand it back to the inlay. And I may have to stop every now and then and hand sand in certain areas. If this wire isn't perfectly flat in the groove, if it's lifted in any of the spots, it'll look differently. But hopefully that's not the case, but we'll find out here in a minute. And I'll actually probably bring you in closer so you can get a better look at it as the copper is exposed. Okay, so as you can see, the inlay is now, the copper wire is now starting to come through the soapstone. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it off the lathe, go over and fill some holes, and then hit it with the CA glue again. And then I'll bring it back, sand it back again until we don't have any little voids or anything like that. And then, yeah, we'll just finish sanding it and get another coat of finish on it. Okay, so she's filled again, and get ready to cut it back again with the 60 grit. I'm not going to go much deeper than this because you got to remember we still got to sand this out to 320, possibly 400 if we want to take all these these scratch marks out of the copper. So there are still some areas where it's a little wider, like here compared to here, and then I'll try and, like I said, make that all look the same with the random orbital sander, and then we'll sand it with the 3.5 inch discs. So I'm not sure what happened there. The camera shut off. Anyway, I filled it again and sanded it back. And now I'm just going to move to the my 3.5 inch pads that go on my drill and just cut this back. It's still going to need some filling in spots, but I figure I'll do that after I get it, sand it to 320. I'll just do a final filling and then hit it with the 320 again to cut it back, and that's it. She should be done. So there, I'll just fill this again, hit it with the 320, and that should be it. And there's where our two pieces came together, and it's just off a little bit. Hopefully you can pick that up. It's not exactly the easiest thing to film. Okay, this is the second coat. Usually I don't squirt it onto the bowl the second and third coat. Usually I just put it on the rag and then wipe it on. There you go. Now if this was earlier in the day, I could put the third coat on later on, but we're a little late in the day, so we'll have to wait till tomorrow. Okay, last coat of finish. 4-0 steel wool. Okay, here's the last coat. It's important that if you're going to use the 4-0 steel wool between coats, that you really take the time to blow it out really well. The steel wool has a habit of embedding in the pores of the wood. Alternative to that, you could use the Scotch Brite pad, but I do find that sometimes they're a little bit too aggressive. So that's why I like to use a real fine 4-0 steel wool. Just make sure that you blow the bowl off really good before you put on your next coat of finish. By the way, we'll let this set up. I'll cut it off the waste block, finish the bottom, and then we'll talk about it here. There it is. Can't go wrong with walnut. Okay, so that's it for the video. The bottom is done now and signed. I still got one more coat of finish to put on, but that's it. And here's our inlay. Try and show this so that you can actually see it. And yeah, it's just copper going across, and of course with the soapstone around it. I'll try and put some stills up at the end, show it off a little better. And again, this is the same wire that's been folded over on itself, and that's kind of what you can get. And you can get different looks. The more tension you put on that wire as you're screwing it will actually change what it looks like. So give that a try. And anyway, as always, if you like what you see in here, please hit that like button. It certainly helps out my channel. And also, if you can share it, that'd be great as well. And if you're new here and you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that. So take care, stay safe, and we'll see you at the next video.